Thank you. So yes, we are recording the lecture now. So again, we're going to be doing a text. We're going to use a text editor to type the code in. We're going to be using Google Chrome to execute the code and check on errors. And then last thing that we're going to do, and we'll talk through this in detail, is that we're going to have a method to then push this up to the web, so that it's going to be living on the internet rather than living just purely on your computer. And we'll talk about that more in detail, but oftentimes you might start working where you're working, as we call it, locally. So working just on your computer, referencing files that are on your computer and you can see it working on your computer. But ultimately, you're going to want to push all those things up onto the web, so that we can access it as teachers and other people could access it if you want to send links around, show your friends, all that kind of stuff. So we'll be doing that using a FTP program, so a file transfer protocol program. So that means taking files from your local computer and then pushing them somewhere else. And the somewhere else that we'll be pushing them by default is so every student has access to webpages.sou.edu. You have some web space that's associated with your user account, and so you can create web pages that are associated with that. And there's some server space so you can put up files, put up images, all the stuff you need to make your games live there up online. And then so we'll be stepping through those things, and then the last thing is really is talking about the code that it's going to take to make this start happening. And Miles really has wrapped up that into a good package for the project 1.1, which is going to be the first step. The goal is really going to be placing up images onto a web page using what is that using? Using JavaScript, but I blanked out. Using JavaScript. That's the sort of the overview of where we're looking at for today. A bunch of things, but a lot of them are little encapsulated things, and the coding stuff is going to be a little bit less intense today, I think, though there are a number of steps related to that. So what do you want to start in with, Miles?
Great. Well, as we're talking about this, I realize on the Moodle, we still need to update. We'll have some links to instructions on how to FTP, and we just have to transfer those links over from the previous.
Do you want me to put that up into the coded visual design?
They're all still good. Yeah, that'd be great if you have it. Yeah, just throw it in there.
Yep.
Or we can do it after class too. So, but yeah, cool. Yeah, well, basically, David, that's thanks. That was a great overview of where we're going with this. So this is what we're going to be working on for the rest of the quarter, and we're going to be. This is it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building every week incrementally. So that you're going to start off with the bare bones this week, and then you're going to end up with a completely working game. And everything that we do from this point out, you're going to be turning in kind of live, so to speak, just by sending us a URL, which is really cool, actually. So that's the big change for this week. And so yeah, we won't really do that big of an overview. I think we've already talked about the idea of doing a game. I just wanted to get into the nitty gritty, and we can talk more about developing the art as you go, because a lot of us are kind of and but what's interesting about this is that the art is not essential to getting the code or the game working. So the art is really something that we can add in and develop in parallel with the development of the code too. So that's kind of part of the fun of this. So we can start off. What you'll do when you get going is you'll go over to, and I'll start screen sharing, I guess, at this point again, and we'll go here. And we'll download this the project files here. And so the project files every week will give you a new set of project files. But you can kind of keep the stuff that we're giving you almost separate from what you set up this week. We're going to show you this week. You're going to set up basically your own project file, and then we'll talk about directory structure. And just, yeah, really quickly, this is kind of what we're going to cover today, the main points that we're going to be talking about. Oh, no, this isn't the main points. This is the finer points of it all here. We're going to be, like David was saying, working in a text editor. So I'm going to be using Sublime Text, which I really like. Rad really likes Visual Studio, right? That's the one you were talking about. And I still haven't used that yet, but I think that's a really widely used one. That's kind of, Sublime Text is almost a little bit old school now, you know.
Yeah, Visual Studio's got some
Yeah.
really interesting like console access and being able to access your file system from inside the structure instead of needing to go to like load file and stuff like that.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, Visual Studio might be a great thing to check out. So might as well get contemporary.
The big thing, there's a big difference between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, just to be clear.
Oh, okay. Tell us about that, actually.
I know Visual Studio is what I use when I'm writing C#, and it's what's recommended for use with Unity. But I picked up a program file called Node that lets you run JS outside of a browser. And I've been using Visual Studio Code to work with that. And that's really interesting because you can, I don't know, this is nothing that you really need for this class.
Yeah.
Sort of high end. But like being
Visual
able to
Studio,
access, but I mean, the really big thing for me is like being able to access my file system from like inside the user interface of the thing instead of needing to go like, okay, load file and then dig through all my files and stuff.
Totally. Yeah. That's great. So that'd be a good one. We'll get a list up of possible ones to use. Yeah. So I'm going to be using Sublime Text, and these are great conversations. You know, like this is stuff we can follow up with on the Discord. What people like, what kind of the standards are. I know that Visual Studio is really widely used. So more so, Sublime Text, like I said, is kind of, you know, rip rap rippity doo for. But I really like Sublime Text. It's kind of my old fashioned way of working. So we'll download our project file, but we're going to start talking about setting up a folder system. And then you're also going to be, we'll talk a little bit about organizing kind of your game art, such as it is right now. Some of you might be really into doing that part of it, and excited about that and already started doing that. And that can be, we'll talk a little bit about that too. So, all right, cool. So we've got this downloaded, and Narshi blows right here, project 11zip. And so I'll open this up. And what I've done here, I've set this up so that you'll just basically have one file. You're not going to turn in all of these different files. These are just here to take us through the project kind of step by step, and they build incrementally. So, so what we'll do is we'll go back here to text. And there we go. And so I've got all of these open at once. And I'm going to move this, kind of shove this over here. And a new window or a new file. And I'll just pull that tab off over here so that it opens up separately. And I got the wrong tab. There we go. Oh, well, that's fine. I'll leave that there. All right. So basically what I'm going to do is you can either just do file save as and save this as your project, but I'm going to go ahead and, I'll just, might as well just do a save as here. So I'll close that untitled I just set up. And I'm going to open up the project 1101 for those of you who like ones. And I'm going to save it as, this will be my project. So this is what you guys will do. And I'm going to save this as something that I know is mine. So I'll just say Miles Inada. So that makes it easy for me to recognize. And I'll save it in the same directory in here with all this other stuff. So I'll save that. And the first thing to notice is that we are working in an HTML working in HTML. Sublime Text and a lot of these text editors will start to, everything is in one file now. So the HTML and the JavaScript and CSS, if we didn't have to use CSS in the same file, but it would all be potentially in this one file. So that's going to be one of the other differences here. Let's see. So what we've done here is we've basically, in using comments, kind of given you a kind of a step-by-step guide through how to do this. And we'll just kind of go through this and we'll talk a little bit about what this is. And over here, the first overview gives us a sense of what we're doing. So what we're starting off with right now is the HTML wrapper. And so everything that shows up on the World Wide Web of ours that we rely on so heavily now has to be encased, so to speak, in an HTML document. HTML is hypertext markup language. It's the language of the World Wide Web, and there's just no getting away from it. You know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was in graduate school, I thought, surely this will not be around 25 years in the future, and here it is. So it's just good to understand that, and the more you get into working for the web, you'll really have to get your HTML down pat, but we're not going to talk about it too much today, but I do want you guys to understand that, and it'll make sense how we're setting this up. So everything that you see here in these little caret pointy brackets, angle brackets, those are HTML tags that they're called. And there are just a couple things we have to know about this HTML document before we can get into the JavaScript stuff. The first thing is right here, is that there's a title tag, and the title tag determines what shows up in the tab of your browser, that name up there. And do you have to have that? No, but it's practice to get into. So we'll just start here. Sonata. Project 1.1. And oh, the assistant has brought me some tea. Thank you. Very nice. That was exciting. So we've got a title. Then we're going to talk about the working method. In CodePen, everything was done automatically, right? So like you didn't even have to save, it was updating stuff all the time. So right now, we're going to get into this kind of a different workflow. We're going to save our stuff, we're going to copy it, the file path, dump it into Chrome, and then do a quick test. So I'm going to save this because I've got it as my own name. So file save. And then I'm going to just right click on this and choose copy file path. And so I copy the file path, and then I'm going to open up a copy of Chrome and pull that over here. And I'm going to paste that in here, paste and go. And voila. And so nothing's happened. We've gotten everything hooked up right, and we basically want to test in the habit of testing things as we go. You don't want to write a bunch of code and then test it because there might be 17 mistakes. So, are we lagging? Yeah, it might be. Darn. Well, let's see how it goes. Hopefully it'll straighten out a little bit. Is it still bad? The lag? Kind of, okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, shoot. Well, let's see how it goes, and maybe David, you'll have to take over or something. I don't know why that would be bad right now, but
Sure. It seems, yeah, it seems like it's getting a little better as well, but we'll see how it goes here.
That's weird. That's disappointing. I'm sad. All right. Well, okay. So let me know. It's too ridiculous. So, all right. We're here. Let's keep going. So we're going to tell now the second thing, the big thing that we're doing today is we are referencing an external library. And so we've talked about this a little bit. We have internal libraries, like math is an internal library that's part of JavaScript. And we're going to be referencing an external library, and we're doing that using a URL in our source. So code up here in our HTML. And so we have saying ooh, my internet.
Yeah. Hey.
Right. So David, what do you want to take over?
Sure. Let me see. Let's see if it's any better on my end here. So give me just a second. How about my audio? Sure. Is my audio seem okay, or is it lagging as well?
No, you seem fine.
Okay, yeah, much better. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, let me just give me a moment here to pull up so I have exactly the same thing that Miles had, because it'll be easier for me to pull it off of my screen than try and control Miles's screen from the same thing. And get my text editor here. Okay, so let's get yours. I'm going to stop your sharing, Miles.
Right.
I will share mine. Let's see here. How do I guess I just share desktop. Okay. Great. Okay, so we can get here and then get to here. Okay, so we were right in here, right? So this looks a little different. This is using Text Wrangler, which is another editor. I think I'll probably actually end up moving to one of the others as well. But Text Wrangler has served me well. I forget if it may be a Mac only version, but I posted links to a bunch of things over in the on the Moodle page now under week 4. And the noise in the background on my end, sorry, I should stop here in just a second. So where Miles was at was looking at this idea of the external library. So here we have a source. So when he's talking about source, it's this SRC, which is meaning that it's the location that it's going to be looking for something. And in here, what is attributed to that, or what's assigned to that, is going to be the code here for the address for the library. So I'm just going to copy that just so we can kind of see what happens here. And if I go over to the browser, first of all, I just did a quick search for create.js, which is the name of this library that we're going to be using. And really, if it might be interesting to you, feel free to sort of click in to createjs.com, just sort of look around. You can find some demos of types of projects that have been done with it. So there's a lot of great stuff that can be done with this. It's not the only library that one might want to use, but it gives a lot of good functionality for basic control over animation, over displaying images, manipulating images, and interactivity that's useful for gaming. So it's a great place to start, and I think it's worked well for us. So this is just general information on Create.js, what it is. But if we actually paste in the address that was in the text document there, we will see actually the library itself. And a lot of times you don't really want to see what's in here, but just to know this is the code that's making everything happen. And ultimately this is I believe JavaScript in here. It's just done in a very, very condensed form, so that it becomes challenging to read from a sort of a human perspective. But like you could go in here and find all of the functions that you'd be accessing using Create.js are all defined in this kind of crazy compacted jumble in there. So the main reason I want to show that is just when I type in this address, we see that it's coming to this file that holds JavaScript in it. So if I go back to our text editor, so what this is doing is it's going to be pulling in whatever information it finds there at that address, and then bringing it in to the overall HTML document. So it now is all the functions that are defined as Create.js are then available to us as well. So that said, the other thing that we do when we're working in JavaScript inside of HTML is that you notice this is inside of a script tag. So it is loading up this resource as a part of the JavaScript sort of environment. If we want to write in our own JavaScript, we do it in between our own set of script tags. So if I forget if Miles mentioned that. So within HTML, we have, it's this tag system. You start a tag, then you do something that's related to that tag, and then you close the tag. So here we're opening the script. Anything that I put in here is going to exist in JavaScript. So I can go in and put in my irregular comments and say JavaScript goes here. And then whenever I'm done writing JavaScript, at the end of my code, I put this close script tag. And for the most part, all of our code that we're going to be working on with is going to be pretty much existing between these two script tags. So we're not really going to go too deep in depth in terms of HTML, other than to say that it's really this wrapper that we're using. We just put our own title in between the tags. We put all of our code in the script tags here. And there might be a few other things that we'll do eventually, but that's it. So it looks like what we are supposed to do here, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because Miles, you're a little more familiar with these things, or with the structure of these assignments. So we want to create an init function that's going to write a message to the document. Great. So inside my script tag here, what I want to do is I want to define an init function. Now, what is an init function?
Well, actually, David.
Oh, am I ahead of myself?
Yeah, actually, this is kind of weird because it's written in order, but it's out of order spatially. So
okay.
Step 3 is down below that talks about where that's called.
Nice.
Yeah, I know.
Cool.
It's real world. This is good. Real world demo, though. This is
yeah. Good. Okay, so I'm going to go. I did notice that 5 was significantly after 2, but I went with it. So let's go in order. So 1, 2, 3 down here. Nice. Is set up the canvas. So this is, we don't really have to do anything right here other than we're just going to describe what's going on here. So number 3 is this canvas. So just like I mentioned with script and other stuff, we have a canvas tag down here. And a canvas tag is just it's like a special HTML location to be able to place graphics and manipulate graphics. It's just like you think of like a canvas, like I'm going to do a painting and my painting is going to have a certain size. Maybe I'm going to call my painting something, and I can put whatever I want on it. I can put all my different color paints. I can draw on it. I can paste up cutouts from magazine, whatever, onto my canvas. So down here, we see a couple things about it. This opens the tag and then closes the tag. So this is the whole thing of the canvas. We give it a name, which we do that by calling it an ID or giving it an ID. We're setting the ID equal to my canvas. So that is saying that if I want to address the canvas later, I call it my canvas. These things are arbitrary, so I could name it whatever I want, but it's usually good to name it something that is clear and related to it being the canvas. So That works perfectly well. And then we give it a width and a height, which is going to be the size. And right now we're doing 1024 by 768. If you want to make your game really long and thin, you could change your canvas to be that. If you want it to be a square shape, you could make sure that the width and height are equal. Okay, so then next we go up here to this number 4. And what does number 4 ask us or tell us here? The body, yep, okay. The body onload attribute specifies that after the HTML has finished loading, the browser should run the init function, and then we'll define that. So yeah, this body, this whole thing here, we see the body is opened and then it's closed. The body, typically, like if you're writing a HTML web page and you're going to build it up just from the ground up and it's purely going to be in HTML, you would put most of your content all in the body. We don't do that actually as much here when we're doing the JavaScripting, but so the body is like what is housed on the HTML document and displayed. So on here, really what we're displaying is this canvas, but also embedded in this body tag is this call saying onload run the function that's named in here. And init, again, is an arbitrary name, but it's a very commonly used arbitrary name, meaning to initialize, to init, to set something up for the first go. So all the things you want to get into place so that your game is going to be ready to run. This is sort of the very beginnings of that. You initialize, get the web page up and running. So it says init, and we see that it has parentheses, meaning that it's a function. Now let's go ahead and define that. So back to where I was up here. And let's see here. Okay, great. So we have JavaScript's going to go in here. We're going to define our function. So this is all kind of a review. Function, give it the same name, init. So we make sure that if this is not the same name as this, it's not going to be called when the page is loaded. So we want this function to happen right after everything else is sort of loaded with the HTML. And then we use our curly braces to put in whatever we want inside of it, or to define what the function is going to be. And then we are supposed to write something to the document. So we can use our old friend document.write. Now that seems familiar, right? And then we say, welcome to the big world. Okay, great. And I'm also going to go ahead and do a console .log so we can kind of see the differences between that here on when we open things into Chrome versus when we were working with CodePen. Console.log. Okay, great. And that's it. We have our JavaScript is now enclosed in our script tags, and we should be good to go here. So first thing, and this is the key thing that you want to do each time, and Miles mentioned it once, I'm going to mention it again, is that we have to save each time before we are going to be able to see the changes. So if I were to come in without saving, this is just as a demo, I didn't save this, and I'm going to find my file that I was working on, which is right here, and I'm going to go into Chrome and place the address in and open it up. Whoa, okay, oops, that's the wrong one. That's why. Let me try that one more time. I'm on this one. Okay, I don't see anything. So as a first intro to the using Chrome as a debugger tool, let's see here. And nothing's happening. I'm expecting something to happen. You and I probably both maybe know I need to save, but before we get there, we see okay, there's nothing here, and how do I tell if anything is happening? So in Chrome, we want to use some of the developer tools. So if you go under View, and then to Developer, then the one that I usually jump to, and I remember the shortcuts for, is this JavaScript console. So on a Mac, it's Option Command C, or excuse me, Option Command J to bring up the console. or you can use this, the menus here. On PC, I believe it's probably Control Alt J, but I'm not sure on that. Someone else can, hey, someone got it, F12 on Windows. Thank you. Okay, so I open it up here. And what that does is it brings up this side panel alongside of my main HTML page. And this has a number of different sort of tabs up top. Console is the one that you're going to go to for errors, or if you're going to console log something and you want to see it there, all that stuff's going to appear there. There's other things you can see in here, and maybe we'll get into more detail later with them. The other things you often look at is sources. You can come over and click in and look and see what are the files that are being referenced. And I can see that there's, hey, it's referencing this create.js library, and it's referencing the HTML file that I'm looking at. And actually, if I do this, I can come in and see my source here, and I look in and say, oh gosh, there's nothing in there. Why is there nothing in there? It must not be looking at the same version that I'm working with. And the other thing that I might see if I go back to console is I have an error here, and it says uncaught reference error, okay, basically meaning error. Init is not defined at onload, okay? And then it's saying, giving me which file is it related to. It's the file that I'm working on. And after the colon, this is the beautiful thing, it gives you the line number. It says :25. So there's an error here on line 25. Right, so let's go back over to the text editor. I'm going to look at what I have. Well, I've changed a bunch of things since then. So let me save it and then make some other errors happen for us. But this used to be line 25. And so I'd see init here, and it's saying init is not defined. So let's make it a real problem rather than an invented one. So I know that the real issue here is I need to save this. So you'd want to make sure that you've saved a copy, you're working on an edited copy, so you can always go back to the original if you want to. Now I'm going to come in here and hit refresh. So you're always going to be doing that. Save in your text editor, come back to Chrome and refresh. Okay, great, it worked this time. So it displayed everything I need here into my into the document. And here in the console, we see that it printed something for me. Ha ha ha. And whenever you print something or log something to the console, you'll notice that it again tells you which file is it coming from and what line. So I could come in and see line 21 should be where that message is coming from. So if I go back to Text Wrangler, line 21, there it is, perfect. So that's just great stuff, because like you might have numbers being generated all over the place in your code, for example, and it's getting put to the console log, and you kind of have to remember which one was that, which number was that coming from, where in the code, and you can look to the line. Or it's always a good practice also to use labels, so you could have your console log say the size of my character is now, and then add in that changing number, that kind of an approach. So let's just see a quick error here. Let me say, I'm going to say document.writ. So I just forced an error here. I'm going to refresh, and nothing's working. So again, if I had this all hidden, so I just got rid of that console, I would say, hey, everything was just working. I made one change and now I don't see anything. Why isn't even the stuff that I had working before working? You'll often find that a lot of errors are I'm not sure the right word, but like are comprehensive or something. Like you do one error and nothing works. That's very, very common. Sometimes you get lucky and it's like most things work, but one little thing's funky. But a lot of times you make a syntax error and then just everything stops. And so if you just look at the blank page, you can say, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Remember to do your shortcut F12, or on a Mac, it's Option Command J, or go to the developer tools, JavaScript console. Pull it up. What was the problem? Okay, document type error, document.writ is not a function. Okay, hopefully here you look very closely at what's here, and see that writ should have been something else, document.write. So I can then go in and make my correction, fix it back up, and it will work again. Again, make sure and save. I use the shortcuts just because it's a lot quicker for me than going up to the menu at each time. So, you know, Command S, probably Control S to do your save. So I can just in a quick flip do that, switch to my other program. Command R is refresh to be able to refresh the page and see the updates happening. Okay. So now I'm starting to lag a little bit too. Sorry about that.
I think mine's back.
Okay,
I think my internet is coming back.
Cool. Let's head over to Miles for a moment and see if he has better luck.
Lag brothers. Okay, cool. So, am I showing you guys the right screen? Are we back in code land over here? All right, cool, nice. And internet connection is holding up. Okay, well, let me know if it goes south again. Yeah, so thanks, that's great. And the debugger, we're going to be spending a lot of time in the console and the debugger. And there was a question on the chat too about will we have a tutorial like we did for some of the later stuff, and yeah, we're going to do that. We'll get that up. It's not up yet, but and these are kind of set up as a tutorial, but I'll go ahead and put it into that form that's more kind of step-by-step as a tutorial. I think that's a good, helpful thing. So yeah, cool. So this was the one that David was just working on here. And I'll just show you kind of the method, I think not method like function, but the technique I would use for doing this is to go ahead and as we get our script down here, I'll just make a little, you know, console.log, hello. So this is basically, this is what this all boils down to, is that we've got, like David said, we have our HTML, just to summarize. We have our title that we put in up here. We have our external reference to the Create.js library. We have set up a canvas object within our HTML. And we have a call to an init function. And like David said, init is short for initialize. And that function is going to be called automatically. So when the HTML page loads, like when you type in a URL, this is what happens in real life is it goes, oh, I'm going to load this HTML document. And as it loads that, it says, oh, they want me to run something called init. And it goes back and it goes up into the JavaScript. That's why this is kind of out of order. It goes back up into the JavaScript and looks for something called init. That's a function. And then it runs. And so this seems kind of arbitrary, but this is really going to be the structure of the game. This is the way this is going to actually work. So what we're doing today is real life. You're going to be using this 4, 5, 6 weeks out, this structure. So, and then we go here and we have to have our function. So we go like, oh, we don't have a function yet. We have init function, init. That's going to do something. What's it going to do? It's going to run a console. And we end it. So hopefully, if I save this and I test it, I should get the same thing that David had there. And inspect. And over here is our console. Init is not defined. So I go back here. Script, function, init. So there's a good real world example of some error. And it might have been that I didn't save it right. So I might have been using, I don't know. Function init, script, reload. Still init. Okay, interesting. Onload init, script. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this stuff here, here, here. Save. Paste and go. Huh. Interesting. Well, let's crowdsource it. You guys see anything in here that's wrong?
It's saying on line 25. So check.
Oh, that's. Or I'm kind of messing up. I wonder if it needs to be reloaded, because this would be a good other kind of real world problem. So let me save this. Ah, so it might be stuck in the cache. It looks like. I go back here, it's saying on line 25, and I'm like, well, I don't have a line 25. So I might be using the wrong. It might not actually be going to the right file. Yeah, this is good. So if I go here and I look at what it's saying, it's got an old version of this with all the comments in it. It's not updating. And so that's really kind of funky. So what we need to do here is clear the cache. And so what do? We go to, is there a shortcut for that?
I think isn't it like Shift Command?
Anyone know that? Yeah. Command Shift Delete on a Mac. Okay. Let's try it. So we go here and we go.
I think, Miles.
Yeah.
I think you can, on a Mac anyway, you can also Shift Command R, I believe is like a full refresh rather than just refresh the page. But maybe not.
I wonder. This is high quality. All right, there it goes. I think I had some funny keyboard stuff. I think that was me doing my cross-platform thing. So it's working now. But I think the problem was that I have a keyboard that is a Windows keyboard that I'm having to swap back and forth all the time. And I think I was hitting like Control instead of Command or something. So I think that was just kind of brilliant there on my part. So I'm glad you guys got to enjoy that. But the other thing is that was a good real world example, because this is the kind of thing that happens. Like you make some kind of human error and then it confuses you and you can kind of freak out, but you figure it out eventually. But also that cache thing can be a problem that oftentimes I have run into that as a problem. So you do want to kind of just have that in the back of your mind as we're dealing with the web. Cool. So we have our function, it's working, everything's good. And so before we move on to the next step, I just wanted to kind of go over some things that might just make this a little easier. And so after I've done all this, I got rid of those comments. I don't really need them anymore. And I can go back and I'm going to just take all of the HTML and just kind of bump it back here against the edge, because I don't need, we don't really care about the HTML. We're really going to be focusing on the JavaScript. And I'd rather just have all of this. I don't want to be taking up extra space with the indents from HTML. And I'm just going to really focus on everything in the script tags. So you're going to learn kind of almost to ignore the HTML. And then we can take this, and then a lot of text editors that do this, a lot of times they'll have a built-in shortcut. And so this is a nice one. You can just select all that text and hit Shift left, Shift Tab will pull this stuff back. Whoopsie daisy. Or not Shift Tab, oops. Well, let me just do it this way. I'm not gonna ride my luck. Do it the old way. All right, cool. All right. So we've got our function, we've got everything set up here. So I just got everything pulled back against the left side, so everything's not indented. And I'm going to save the indents for our JavaScript. Cool. All right. So now on the second part of this, we're going to start focusing on our JavaScript. So here we're going to do 4 things. We're going to set up a section using a comment for our global variables. And global variables are those things that we're going to access throughout the game. And so the big global variable we're going to set up for right now is going to be called the stage, my stage. And that's going to be our first time that we're accessing the create.js library. Then we're going to initialize that variable by creating a new stage object. And I'll show you what that means here. Okay, so what we're going to do at the top of our script here, so this is our JavaScript. So, this, if you want to kind of clarify this, you could say, JavaScript land. So that's our JavaScript. These are the borders of JavaScript land. Leaving JavaScript land. So between here and here, that's where everything's going. We can ignore the rest of this stuff. So up here, I'm going to set up a comment. I'm going to say, these are going to be my global variables. Comments don't do anything. They're just there for us to help things stay organized. And I'm going to declare a variable called myStage. And I'm not going to initialize it. I'm not going to give it a value yet. I'm just saying, hey, create a variable called myStage. Computer's like, sounds great. I'll do that for you. But it's not going to do anything yet. Where it's going to start to do something is in the init function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say in the init, this is step 3 here, have the init function set up to create js.stage object. And so it's right here. I can just copy this whole thing. And this is what we're not expecting you guys to remember all of this stuff or to get super just kind of, oh yeah, create js.stage, blah, 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 blah. Copy and paste is great. That's the way that I learned a lot of this stuff, and that you will learn a lot of this stuff too. And then you can kind of, you will start to learn the syntax of it. So, so I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in here, and then we'll take a look at what we just did. And I'm going to actually get rid of this console.log for right now. And I'm going to go over here and paste it. So now I've got this line in here. Let's take a look at what this line actually means. And it's a little intimidating at first, but it's similar to what we were doing with the random numbers, where you have a lot of nested parentheses, and that's kind of difficult at first. Math.clore parentheses, math.random parentheses dot, and parentheses, parentheses, parentheses. So this is kind of what we're seeing here. And so what's this line here? This is my stage. What's my stage? It's a variable. How do we know it's a variable? Because we declared it up here. So we're saying take the variable my stage, and remember the equal sign means gets, or, and the variable my stage gets a new, and you'll notice that new is what we've called a keyword. It's a word that's been defined. So take the variable my stage and give it a new commas after the new. Okay. I can't remember. David might have used that as the way to create an array. Oh, my internet connection is going. Uh-oh. Well, we'll see how far we get here. So new is a keyword that creates a new copy. So we could write something like this. Which means array. No.
Let's see. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can. Let's see if maybe I can jump in here for a minute. So the new idea that Miles was on was working with a new. It's a way in JavaScript of creating. I think of it like a new instance of something. So it's creating, in this case, a new instance of a create.js stage. And the stage is really, it's kind of like a canvas. It's a place in the create.js library that exists to be able to place things. So I'm getting mine up here, so I'll be able to sort of jump in right where he was at. And here we go. Okay, I'll share my screen now. Okay, there we go. So in here, this is what we were using. I wasn't following along exactly with where he was at, but so very quick reiteration here, setting up global variable here. So I'm just going to say global variables, and then I'm going to create a variable named myStage. So you can just say var myStage. And then down here, what we're doing is in the init function is we're going to be assigning a new value to, or a new thing to the myStage, and that thing is a new instance of this create.js stage. So now that means whenever we talk to myStage as a variable, we're going to be talking to all the things that create.js has associated with stages. And stages can have size. Things can be added to the stage. So like an image can be placed onto the stage. All that kind of stuff we'll now be able to reference through this thing that we've set up as a new create.js stage. Okay. Hey, someone coming back in there?
That's me.
Hey.
I'm back.
Nice.
The internet is against me. The internet had it with my life.
Yeah, I don't think it's just
done.
I don't think it's just you, because I think I'm getting it here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, David, so I was just gonna say if this all goes, I was just gonna say if this just goes to hell in a handbasket, we can make a video that kind of covers this stuff too. So.
Yep. Okay.
Backup plan.
Nice. Okay. Good. So I'll keep going for a tiny bit here, and then we can jump back over. So this is so now to create or to check our work. This one is asking us to log the create.js stage object to the console, and that might seem a little strange because normally we've just sort of put text there. But this is a way of being able to see what that thing is and actually look into it, even if it's more complicated than just some text. So I'll just come in and say console.log and then myStage. And you'll notice that by not using I'm not putting quotations around this to make that the word myStage. Instead, I'm telling it to look for whatever is defined as myStage, and then we'll log that. And most text editors, you'll notice, are going to do something similar where I highlight one and you'll see it underlines or otherwise highlights other instances of that same word. So that's a great way to keep track and see, like, have I used this before, or where has it been used before, so you can move forward with it. So nice. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to then load it up into my browser. I'll put it over here is good. And now we don't see anything on the page itself. That's fine. But then once I bring up the JavaScript console, we see that there is something here. It's not very obvious what it is, and it says A at the moment. But if you notice the little triangle next to it, if you open that up, we see a whole bunch of things here. And these are all of the elements or the properties that have been defined in relationship to the object that was just printed. So our object is this stage element, this thing that can hold things. And we may know what some of these things are. We may not know what some of the other ones are. Here we see that it has a canvas associated with it. It's being displayed within the canvas that was called My Canvas. Great. And let's actually look at that, because I didn't explain that very well here. So we're creating this new create.js stage, and what's the stage going to be made on? Where are we building the stage? Well, it's being built on this document element. So this is going to the HTML side, finding an element by ID, something that's named My Canvas. So if you remember, we named My Canvas. We named the canvas down here My Canvas. So what this is saying is it's taking this thing, this canvas element, and then we're going to be building the new JavaScript stage, this create.js stage, on top of that HTML canvas. So important thing is that these two words need to be the same. Otherwise, those things are not going to be linked up together. Yep. So otherwise, there's all sorts of other properties in here. You can position it, you can scale it, you can do all sorts of things. Most of the times we don't do those on the stage, but those similar properties are going to come up once you start placing things within the stage. Like I want to put a tree there, and then I want to scale it up, or I want to position it, put it left or right, all that kind of stuff. But it's really neat and useful that you can go in and see actually everything there that the computer sees and knows about any object. If you print it to the console, you can do that. So yeah, nice. Did you want to jump over or to the next thing, Miles? The one, or see if there's questions and then go over to the 103, or do we risk it?
Yeah, I know. I don't know if we should keep going or what. I mean, it's kind of nutty, but
yeah,
I think,
well, it's up to you.
Going, yeah.
Yeah, maybe if we want to, I don't know. Yeah, if we want to focus on other things, it's fine too.
It might be that maybe the best thing to do would be to just kind of say, all right, let's go to the busting out here in the next couple hours that will actually cover all this stuff. It just might be easier to do it that way.
Sure.
For this, since it seems janky, because it's pretty disruptive, at least in my brain. I'm like, where are we at? What's happening? It's hard to concentrate on it. But so yeah, why don't we maybe do that? Like, and that'll really go into this. And I guess where we're going with this, or maybe we can just jump ahead, and to show how this ultimately works. I guess I'll try to share one more time, but if it doesn't work, we can just go to the video thing. So going to be, I'll go ahead and try one more time here. So what we're looking to do is to get our artwork on the screen, basically, and to be able to position it on the screen. But it's not just on the screen, it's actually within that web browser that we're talking about. So ultimately, that's the big goal of this whole week, is to be able to talk directly to a web browser and to make this content accessible to anyone in the world. And so that's what we're trying to do. And this create.js and JS to do that. And like David was saying, create.js is written in JS, so the syntax is going to be the same. So a lot of the things that we're talking about. So let's just go here, and I'll just jump ahead to show you the kind of the big reveal. So we won't go through it step by step necessarily right now, though that's all step by step out in those files. But we've kind of built out where we have our global variables area, have stage set up. And did you got the stage set up right in the last one, David? I had kind of blanked out there. So we got our stage set up. That's that line here. We have a ticker set up, which is something new as well, which is, again, it's another create.js object. So anything that has that prefix create.js dot, that means it has to go out to the create.js library, find the thing with that name, and bring it back to the document. So this is going out to the create.js library. It's finding something called a ticker. And attached to a ticker is a method called _set FPS, which is set frames per second. And video games these days like to run at 60 frames a second. So we're going to be ambitious. Given the way the internet's been working today, it probably wouldn't work at 60 frames a second, but we're going to say run it at 60 frames per second. And then we're also going to go back to the ticker, and we're going to set up this method here, which is add event listener, that takes these parameters in here. And parameters, we'll remember, we talked about last week, which are, if we were to go into the create.js library and look this up, it would say it takes the parameters, the event, and then the function to run. So the main thing about this is kind of where the magic starts to happen in terms of, this is where we're actually going to start to be making a game, is that this is going to call this function called game loop, which is going to run our game. And it's going to run at 60 times a second. The function game loop is going to be called. Everything that's in game loop will happen, will run magically. So that's going to be the magic thing that starts to happen here. So, and we're doing that through create.js. The other thing we've done here, we've created a function called init game that will actually reset the game itself. So we've made a distinction here between things that need to be called only one time when the web page itself loads. And so in the future, what we'll do is we're going to say, like, a big part of handling a game or an interactive project is you've got a lot of files that are kind of big, like sound files are notoriously big, image files can be big. And so once we download those things, that would be part of init. But if the player plays the game and they lose, or they want to play, re-download all that stuff. And so we're making a distinction here between stuff we only need to do once and stuff that we'll want to do kind of maybe at the player's discretion. And that's init game. Init game is like, hey, start the game over. Start the game over. Start the game over. So they can play as many times as they want, not having to reload everything. So that function init game is called here at the end of init. So when it goes through everything else and everything's all set up, the stage is set up, the ticker is set up, it runs init game. And init game then is going to do our actual setup of putting stuff on the stage, which is kind of the whole deal today, which is our big goal for the day, is to get on the stage using JavaScript. So how do we do that? Well, we have some variables defined up here. We have hero. So we're going to say, take the variable hero and give it a new create.js, just like we did for the stage. You'll see the syntax is the same. Make a new copy of, instead of a stage, it's this thing called a bitmap. So make a new copy of a create.js bitmap. And which bitmap it's asking us in the parameter, we're passing it the argument go to the folder named images / then look inside and find something called hero.png. And the second step is to say, now use our stages method, which is add child, and put the hero on the stage. And that's what actually puts something on the stage. So that's basically summation of what this whole first week is about. It's like set up a stage, set up a ticker, set up bitmap objects for each thing that you want to have actually show up, and then put those objects onto the stage. And so you're going to do that a few times during this project. You're going to kind of repeat that just to get familiar with that flow of what that is. So it's really confusing the first, couple times you do it, but then after a while you're like, oh, okay, I start to get it. So let's do that. So we've got hero, bitmap, images hero.png. And so this slash notation is just folder notation. So slashes mean there's a folder named images / and that image is inside of it, hero.png. You'll notice it's a string, yeah. And then we're going to add it to the stage. And what we're adding to the stage is not this here, we're adding the actual variable hero, and variable hero contains this whole thing. So cool. So let's try that out. So I'm going to go here and run this. Save it, copy it, and Lord knows what's going to happen. All right. Do a file search for this. Awesome. What the heck? Copy file path. Go to Chrome. Paste and go. Okay, cool. So there's our hero. He's come to save us from this janky internet day. And so our hero is now on the page, and they're looking fresh and fancy. All right, so cool. So this actually is like, you could go out and like celebrate if we weren't under quarantine right now at this point, because that's actually a big, we've actually done a crazy thing. We've actually got an image to show up through JavaScript and JS, and we didn't know how to do that before. That's for sure. So maybe we've been able to do stuff in HTML and img src equals blah 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 blah, but now we're using JavaScript to control the HTML canvas through the stage object. So there's kind of this back and forth pipeline going on. So that's pretty cool. So let's do a couple more things. So right now, our hero is sitting up here, go away, sitting up here in the upper left-hand corner, which is kind of okay, but the game would kind of suck if everything just stayed in the upper left-hand corner. It wouldn't be that fun, just like in the upper left corner of a browser window. So let's move this character somewhere more exciting. Ooh, let's put him in the center stage. Okay, so let's go here, and we're going to use that using the .x property of our bitmap object. So our create.js.bitmap object has the property. The property is a predefined variable that contains a value. And the one we're going to use is called .x. So if I just go here, and if I simply say hero.x, that's all I have to do, hero.x, and I can give it a number. And I My canvas width is 1024. Half of 1024 is 512. So I can say 512. And I can save this. And I can reload this. And aha, he's now halfway across the screen on our canvas. So that's cool. Well, if there's a .x property, because x is left to right, then surely there must be a .y property, which is up and down. Let's see if we can get lucky here. Hero.y equals 400. Save. And R is the shortcut for reload. Oh, and so in computer screen stuff, positive y is actually goes down. So the top of the screen in computers is 0, and then as you go down, it's positive. So it'd be 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, which is where we are here. So if I go back and I change this to 200, he should move up the screen. And, you know, et cetera. So if I put him at 0, at y equals 0, they'll be back up here at the top. Cool. So by default, this character is on this is not by default, but this character is just on a square. And by default, the registration, the one point that the computer uses to locate that object when we give it the command to put it on X and Y coordinates, is in the upper left-hand corner. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to oftentimes what we call center register that. So they don't use the upper left-hand corner, use the center of the object. And we'll see how to do that in a second. But just you can kind of get a sense of what registration is. So right now, if I go back and I set this to X equals 0, Y equals 0, it'll look just like it did the first time we loaded this, where he's in the upper left-hand corner. And that's because the default is upper left-hand corner of the image is set to 0, 0. So watch what happens when I change the registration point to the center. And I change the registration point. I'll just uncomment these lines out here. By using the .regx and .regY properties. And these are all predefined properties that are part of the bitmap object. So .x, .y, .regx, .rgy are all properties we can use to change the way the computer handles our bitmap. So 64 and 64. Why did I use 64? Because I know that the image that I made is 128. So 128 divided by 2 is 64. So it's going to put the registration point 64 pixels across and 64 pixels down, which will be in the center of our image. So when I do this and I leave 0, our registration point is now, that's our registration point, is right there in the center of that image. So 0, 0 is now up here. So, okay, well, but what's nice about this is it actually lets me center things. So if I wanted to have this thing in the center of the canvas, I know that this would be 512. Oops, X 512. Oops. And Y would be, what's half of 768? 369. That's weird. I don't know why I can't do that, but okay. And so now this guy should be more or less in the center of our stage. Can't really tell because it's all white, so oops. Great. And we'll see that this is going to be really important for rotation because we're probably going to want our characters to rotate around and do cool things. And so we want that rotation to happen in the center, not in the upper left-hand corner. So that's it. So we've got a character on the screen. I'll just do this one more time to put the background on. So I'll go here, I'll declare a new variable called BG. We'll copy this little bit of code here. And I'll put it down here. I'm just gonna get rid of all these. And so I've got, this is gonna change to BG. My image's name is BG. These names don't have to match, but it's kind of easier if they do, if you can kind of think ahead, which I'm not very good at, but there we go. And I'll reload it. Okay, so hey, I've got a background. Looks great. So what's the problem though? It's not a background. The background needs to go to the back. Well, one way we can do that, I would say for this week, let's just do it this way, is put this code first. So put it before the hero code loads, and that way it'll put the background in first. And ta-da. So we have our hero is here happily in the center of the screen of our background, and life looks good. And we'll just give our hero some targets to chase around. So we'll go, you know, variable frenemy, and we'll just repeat the same thing. So we'll go out here. I'm just going to copy all this code that we used to place the hero, and I'll just paste it down here. And instead of hero, we'll call this frenemy. And I think I called this box 128. Let's use 64. And some different numbers. Save, reload. Didn't find it. Shoot. Console. Error. Oh, I know what I did. I made a mistake. I added the hero again. So copying and pasting, yeah. Like I said, real world today. We're getting real world. All right, great. Hey. All right, things are looking up. Now, we'll end it kind of right at this moment because this is the exciting cliffhanger for next week. If you can hold on for that long. So you kind of think about this like, what's next? So we can kind of, you know, I would say for this project, you want to go ahead and lay out, you know, just do it just for the practice. Go ahead and get 2, 3, 4 targets on the stage. And I just put these placeholder graphics. That's fine this week. For if you're feeling artistic, go ahead and start to make your own this week. Because that's going to be, by the time, you know, we're towards the end of the quarter, we're really going to want to have your own graphics in there. But, you know, if you got your hands full just making the code work, that's fine. But this is kind of the fun part, just making the images. So where we're going next week is that we don't want to just sit here and copy and paste and copy and paste. Like if we're going to have 100 of these blocks falling on us, we don't want to do that 100 times. And so we're going to start to use some of the techniques that we learned in the first 3 weeks, for loops, arrays, and things to be able to automate this process. And that we can use randomness, which we also worked in the first 3 weeks, to not have to manually figure out in advance where everything has to go. We can say, place these things on the stage so that they fit within the stage, but at different places. And so we're going to be using all the things that we learned in the first 3 weeks, we're going to be seeing again, but using, instead of random numbers and dog and cat, we're going to be using actual these bitmap objects in order to do that. Cool.
Nice. Yeah. So if you're starting to think about working on your own artwork, just recommend making files that are going to end up being PNG files. So sometimes, if you work with Photoshop or other image creation tools in the past, you may have seen PNG as an option, but you may have opted to use something like JPEG or other output formats. PNG is just a really good one to be using because it allows you to maintain transparencies, so that you don't see the white square behind the face. That stuff all disappears, and you just see the face itself, or the character or the object, whatever. Other things that people are asking, I see there, are so about dimensions. It's pretty flexible. It really depends on what you want to use. So if you want to have a really large character, that's fine to make a larger size. I think the one that Miles was working with was 128 by 128 for the hero character. But the one thing to be aware of is just there's a big difference between the image files that you might create and then the images that you export from that. So you might be working in, like if you're working in Photoshop, you might create a PSD file, which is the file that has all the multiple layers and the shapes that went into creating your object. And that file might easily be 20, 30 megabytes or something like that, depending if you're working on something that's fairly in depth. You don't want a file that's going to be that big to be loaded onto a web page, because you can imagine how long that would take to load. So when you do your exports, you want to make sure that you export it out as an image type, that you do it just to the size that you're actually going to use it as. If you want your image to be able to be scaled up to a really large size, make it just the size of that largest size you imagine. Because really the smaller you make the file size, the quicker the files are going to load, and the quicker, more responsive the games are likely going to be. But so, a typical, often people do a 128 by 128 is sort of a good size to be aiming for. Backgrounds are going to be larger. You want your background basically to be the size, typically if it's a static background, the size of the canvas that you're working with. So use those dimensions as a guide for that.
So we're talking about pixel dimensions. Yeah,
pixels.
And you could do a square format, you could do a horizontal, you could do a vertical format. We'll leave that up to you guys. It's basically, generally it's something that's going to fit in the browser window. So even if you were doing something like a side scroller, the idea behind a side scroller is you're only seeing this fixed section at a time. And so that's going to be your constant, and that needs to be something that fits in the browser window. So just kind of make a decision. It's a design decision as an artist or as a creator, like, ooh, I want it to be like this, or square or vertical or horizontal. That's great. We want you guys to be thinking about that, and you can make it work. And so what you would do is set up your canvas in HTML to match it, and then design all of your assets accordingly. Does that kind of answer that question? Cool. And then pixels for sure, like no inches.
Yep.
Resolution doesn't matter, inches don't. So we're going to use the word resolution here just to mean the height in pixels by the width in pixels. That's it. There's no dots per inch, there's no PPI, none of that stuff matters. It's just the pixels by the pixels. That's all we care about for this, because it's a screen thing.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about the FTP thing at all, or do we want to? We do have a video on doing that, but maybe just a real quick sort of overview of the concept, or what do you think, Miles?
Well, I'm kind of thinking like we could do it next week.
Okay.
And maybe we just say
just
we can
upload
change
your
the assignment. We'll just say zip up your folder that you've made and just upload it, and we'll deal with FTP next week, because I think this is just kind of tanked out today, so we don't need to heap misery on ourselves. So we'll keep it.
Sounds good. And then the only quick pointer, we'll post some links there, that is, if you're wanting to be sort of prepped for next week, ready to do that, you might want to go ahead and download an FTP software that you can work with so that you're sort of ready to follow along. There's a couple different varieties that you can use. We've used in the labs on campus, we have CyberDuck is a common one. And we'll put a link to that, as well as another one is, what is it? WinSCP, I think is a very common one on Windows side. CyberDuck exists on both. And I'm sure there are a number of other ones. FileZilla says Rad's using. The basic idea is pretty simple. So there's a number of different options that you'd have. So as long as it's an FTP program that's going to work on your end, and do SFTP is technically the protocol that we have to use, talking with webpages.sou. So yep, we'll post those links. There are already some videos that we have in terms of stepping through the CyberDuck process. So if you wanted to go that route, we can have that stuff up and ready for you ASAP. But the other ones will get you some step through by next week.
Yep. Cool. And so, yeah, next week, again, spoiler alert, we'll be dealing with animation. So, and there was a question here about animating characters using a sprite sheet. And so we're not going to get into that yet, but we're going to start animating in terms of having things move on the screen. So how can we make our character move around? How can we make the targets move around? How can we make things happen in terms of motion? And so what we've done a lot this week to set the stage for that, with our ticker. So the ticker is going to be the magic thing that says 60 times a second, change where these things are. So we'll get into doing that next week as well. So it should be pretty cool. Things are going to speed up quite a bit in terms of what you're able to do after this week. So yeah.
Great. Yep, and we'll work on a little video that sort of steps through the things that we were talking about today, again, in a sort of maybe more like tutorial fashion, and hopefully you can get that video and not have the hiccups that we were having. And I think you'll see, it's like we covered a bunch of things, but ultimately the amount that we're really asking you to do is kind of those last steps really that Miles stepped you through at the end. Place the images on there, maybe position them, add them to the stage. And that stuff's pretty, once you sort of get the concepts down, which we were trying to talk through, the actual tasks are fairly manageable. So if you get through that stuff and it's like, okay, great, now that I understand it, I can make that happen easily, and you want to start spending some time doing asset development, drawing some characters, making those into some digital forms, that'd be great. That's a good use of your time. You don't, as Miles said, you don't have to. You can use his stand-ins, or go to the web and find an image that you want to use that's sort of appropriately sourced, that's PNGs, and you could go that route as well, just to be able to display stuff and see how it's working in this environment.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, thanks for hanging with us through all the technical ridiculousness today. Sorry about that, but we'll make it happen. We'll make the magic happen with some insightful and informative and always entertaining videos.
Nice. And we'll be here on Wednesday also. So yes, we can answer questions on that process, maybe step through it a little more again in a little less hiccupy way in the lab sections.
Because the internet will be fixed by then.
Oh, I'm sure.
It'll have healed itself. Cool. All right. Well, we'll hang out for a bit if people want to ask us questions or anything, but otherwise, see you soon.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
That's funny that it was so janky today. It was just like,
yeah.
I've been noticing that the just internet generally has been getting a lot more spacey recently, like the last 4 or 5 days.
Huh.
It's groaning under the strain.
Yeah.
People said that was going to happen. So I guess it's happening.
Yeah,
because then it was totally like amazing. It was like, oh, look at all this bandwidth, and then
Yeah, I was amazed at how well it was working for the first couple weeks of this.
yeah. So, hey, I guess we kind of got lucky in a way, because